Hey, here we go again. We are going to talk about Ordinance of 1787. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that I say that there are two governments. One of the states, when they combine together to form a Congress of the United States of America, and that they have a constitution. And the preamble is like a mission statement where it says the people of the military will do certain things for the people of the states or the states in general. And that the states have an enacting clause, and then the federal government has an enacting clause. And I've showed these to you in other papers. Here in the Ordinance of 1787 is the enacting clause of the federal government, be it ordained by the United States and Congress assembled. So in the Articles of Confederation, we have be it enacted by the United States of America and Congress assembled at the beginning of that document. And then within that document, around Article 3 or so, it says that it gives some powers to its agency, a national government or general government, which is for the most part a military and a judicial system, and its enacting clause is the United States and Congress assembled. So in this ordinance of 1787, dated July 13th, 1787, this is only months prior to the Constitution being completed and signed. I find it hard to believe that if the federal Constitution repealed or replaced any state constitutions or the Articles of Confederation, that just a few months, we're talking about like 3 months later, they have a federal constitution, which is then ratified by every one of the states. And so my position on this is that the federal constitution did not repeal or replace anything. It was just in addition to and is one of the several organic laws that make up our one system of government. Our one system of government is broken up into pieces. It's broken up into state republics, and it's broken up into one national state government of states and then a general government which does some national things um, for the entire country, such as a national military. So in the ordinance of 1787, it's basically for governing the territories that have not been made into states yet. And it goes through a list of things that the United States will do or ensure are done for those territories and how those territories can be made into states. What the I think it's going by the law of nations and what the law of nation requires for a state to become a state. And it has to do with populations and free men and landowners and those kind of things. But down here towards the bottom, we see that in July 17th or July 13th of 1787, just about 3 months and a few days before the federal constitution was completed, it says that once a territory has declared itself a state, that the Constitution and government, so to be formed, so the state government, shall be Republican and in conformity to the principles contained in these articles, and so far as it can be consistent with the general interest of the Confederacy, such admission shall be allowed at an earlier period, and when there may be a less number of free inhabitants in the state than 60,000. So it's saying that in order to become a state and join the Union, they have to be consistent with the Articles of Confederation. They have to have a state Republican constitution and conform with certain principles. And even if it doesn't have enough people or free inhabitants, it can still become a state. But until then, it'll be governed by the United States generally, the United States prior to the Constitution being written. And then, of course, we have the Constitution, which was signed on the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787. It's the same year, only about 3 months and 4 days later, the Constitution was signed, and then it began to be ratified by the states. So the states, when they ratified the federal Constitution, didn't repeal or replace anything, least of all the Articles of Confederation, because every one of the states' republic constitutions were supposed to conform with the principles of the Articles of Confederation, and then adopt the federal constitution. And what the federal constitution did, as we see in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, was here we see by cession of particular states and acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States. Okay, right here. And to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state, in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, basically forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, basically forts, fortifications. So this is the major point that the states were submitting to or agreeing with when they ratified the federal constitution, that they were going to set aside some lands um, for the federal government to make into forts, and that it would allow the federal government to practice the Constitution on those forts. And if we look at the preamble, what we see here is we, the people of the United States, in other words, those military people, in order to do these things for the United States of America. So the land was set aside for forts and the seat of government, and the Constitution would be followed. So, in other words, the federal Congress would have legislative power over those forts so that it could do the federal works listed here in the Constitution. So, the military people and a military Congress with a president with a military background would have some land, some federal land set aside by the states, and they would be able to build forts on those lands, and they would be able to have a Supreme Court at the seat of government. And why? Justice, domestic tranquility, which is peace, defense, which is war, general welfare, to keep the troops healthy, fed, warm, okay, uniformed. And we do that to secure the blessings of liberty, or they do that. They do these things in the Constitution to bring this list of things forward. This is sort of like a mission statement. And they do it for what? For the states. The states, all the states equally. The United States of America are the states. And the United States is shown in the Articles of Confederation. Now, some people say that there's a flaw in the Articles of Confederation because it had no power, but the Articles of Confederation were written with the United States in it. The United States had the power, and the United States was the national government, but the United States is limited to the seat of government and the places purchased for forts. So there wasn't a lot of power that needed to be had to just do the most basic and necessary things that needed to be done. So the United States of America and Congress assembled could allow the federal government some temporary powers to do some things outside of the Constitution, but it didn't really make a whole lot of laws for the free private civilians in the state that are not on federal lands. So the United States of America and its enacting clause passed laws for the United States outside of the Constitution, but still applied to the United States and on the federal lands and to the people on those lands, but not really to the people in the states. So the federal Constitution is basically saying we're going to do these things. The United States works on the federal lands, and we're not going to really do a whole lot outside of the federal lands. They do have some other powers, such as, making treaties and representing America. as the United States, because those ministers, consuls, and other people that work for the United States, they're in service to the United States, but they're supposed to be loyal to all the states, the United States of America. So it's really, I think, a brilliant system they have here. There's some flaws in it, and that's okay. They're minor flaws, I think. The problem is, I think for the most part, that people have been so indoctrinated and confused and miseducated and just downright deceived on the entire system of governments and how they work together to bring about these things in this preamble, which we call it the preamble. I would rather call it the mission statement. This is the military accepting its orders from the states. So the military people, we the people of the United States, the military people, they do these things for the United States of America. These are their goals. This is like their mission statement, their permanent mission statement is to protect for against domestic violence, they help bring forth tranquility, promote the general welfare. Um, this is basically a mission statement. It's the title of the whole reason why we have a federal government that is a federal Congress comprised of military members and a president who's the president of the United States, which is the commander in chief of the land and naval forces and the militia when um, called into actual service of the United States. So we have the ordinance here to go over it with a enacting clause, the United States in Congress assembled, which we see in the Articles of Confederation, passed just about 3 months and 4 days prior to the federal constitution being completed. So the federal constitution is the thing that has force, but it only has force insofar as it can order those who are in the military or who have signed a contract to agree to be under orders. They're no longer civilians, they're in the military, they're in service to the United States, loyal to all the states, the United States of America. They're under contract, they have an oath, they're a different status, they live on federal lands, and they help bring forth the mission in the Constitution. This statement right here, the preamble. And the Constitution, of course, like I said, was passed only about August, September. So July, August, and September, like 2 months and 4 days after the last ordinance was signed on how the territories can become states and how the United States military will protect those lands, and how they made treaties with the tribes so that the tribes and the states and the people, the inhabitants of the territory, could be at peace with one another. Okay, so the Constitution, the federal Constitution, did not repeal or replace anything. It never repealed or replaced anything. It just created an agency that each state, being free, sovereign, and independent with all rights, powers, and jurisdictions not given to the United States, had to agree to individually because they were independent. They can't be independent. They can't each be independent and sovereign and free if some other force can force them into accepting something that maybe they don't want to be a part of. So they could be part of um, the whole system, but only if they agreed individually. Just like you individually have to sign a contract, you can't sign a contract for um, your posterity, for all your generations to come after you. Uh, you sign the contract for you, so each state signed the contract for them. Whether or not that can last from one generation to the next is something that Thomas Jefferson brought to light, and he had certain feelings about it, and he said that one generation cannot bind the next generation. Otherwise, the generations that have passed and are no longer alive, that the earth still belongs to them, And the world should not ever, the earth should not ever belong to those things that are already dead, that it always has to belong to the things that are living. Some people claim it's a living constitution, and other people, like Thomas Jefferson, might claim that the Constitution could be completely replaced by the next generation of people. Okay, so two different enacting clauses. The Constitution did not repeal or replace anything. It was just accepted by the states because each state was free, sovereign, and independent with all rights, powers, and jurisdictions not given to the United States. So each state individually had to accept, had to ratify the federal Constitution, give some lands to the federal government for the erection of forts, and they also had to give the lawmaking power over those federal places. But other than that, we're supposed to have a republic or a commonwealth, which is um, an agreement with a Republican form of government. So it doesn't matter if you say commonwealth or republic, as long as they're in agreement with a Republican form of government, then they work. It doesn't matter what you call the Constitution or type of government in a state. Okay, so like, share, subscribe.